Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a look at one of the most famous architectural metaphors in human history, and we're going to use it to decode some deeply foundational teachings. We're talking about taking concepts that most people just treat as pretty poetry and revealing the highly structured blueprint hidden right beneath the surface.
You know the story in Matthew 7, right? Jesus talks about two builders, one wise, one foolish. The foolish guy builds his house on the sand. And in this context, building on the sand is really about listening to the words of man, the endless shifting opinions and philosophies we're bombarded with every single day. But the wise man, he builds his house on the rock. And Jesus is crystal clear here. Building on the rock means building your life entirely on his specific sayings.
So, this brings us to the ultimate question every single one of us has to answer for ourselves. Do you want to build on the rock or on the sand? If we genuinely want to build on that rock, we've got to figure out what exactly it's made of. We know it's his sayings, but how do we identify them? And more importantly, how do we make absolutely sure we're building our foundation on them? Well, to figure that out, we need a bit of a decoder ring.
Translating the Beatitudes and finding the core. To find the core of these sayings, we literally just flip back a couple of chapters to Matthew 5, where we find the famous Beatitudes. But to decode these profound poetic statements into actionable principles, we actually need to look a bit later in the New Testament. When you compare the Beatitudes to the Apostle Paul's 6 principles of the doctrine of Christ over in Hebrews 6, something pretty amazing happens. They translate perfectly into one another. Literally, they're the exact same concepts, just viewed through 2 different lenses.
Now, you might be thinking, wait, how does a list of poetic blessings match up with a strict doctrinal list? The answer comes down to the simple premise that these teachings are original, not progressive. It's the idea that whatever Jesus originally meant in Matthew is exactly what the writer of Hebrews was reinforcing later on. They aren't inventing new doctrine, they're just categorizing the exact same foundational rocks that were laid down in the very beginning.
So if we map these 6 principles together with the Beatitudes, they elegantly build this conceptual house. And they do it by grouping into 3 distinct pairs. The first pair establishes our relationship with God. The second pair dictates our relationship with others. And that final pair? It prepares us for eternal realities. It is a perfect, step-by-step architectural blueprint.
Moving to pair 1, knowing God and establishing the base. Let's actually start laying this foundation. This first pair is entirely about establishing our relationship with the Creator. The very first saying is, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." Now, this doesn't just mean feeling a little down. It means completely giving up on your own self-deluded religiosity. It's that profound realization that without God, you are spiritually destitute. You bring absolutely nothing to the equation. It's stepping away from any personal goodness you are relying on and just admitting your complete spiritual poverty.
If we look at our Hebrews decoder ring, this beautifully translates to the very first principle of the doctrine of Christ, repentance from dead works. Realizing you are poor in spirit is the exact same thing as repenting from your own dead works. It's turning away from self-reliance and admitting that your own efforts are just spiritually bankrupt.
Once you hit that point of realizing you have nothing, well, you're ready for the next beatitude, blessed are the meek. In the ancient Greek context, meek definitely didn't mean weak or passive. It was actually used to describe a powerful wild horse that had been disciplined to a bridle. So immense strength under control. Being meek here means being humble enough to truly believe there's a God and yielding your own potential to His direction. It's trusting His system is going to get you exactly where you need to go, even when it totally disrupts your own plans. And this aligns perfectly with the second principle in Hebrews, having faith toward God. Being meek before the Creator is literally having absolute faith toward Him. These 2 concepts together, admitting you're spiritually destitute and then fully trusting in God's reality, they lock together to form the unbreakable foundation of our relationship with God.
Now for pair 2, blessing others and relating to everyone else. With our internal foundation set, the blueprint moves outward to how we relate to everybody else. Jesus continues by saying, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness." This is describing a deep, consuming desire to be made right. It's a craving to be washed, cleansed, and perfectly matched to Christ's standard. Kind of like wanting to be put through a spiritual dishwasher so you're completely clean in how you interact with the world around you.
This maps directly, 1-to-1, with the third principle in Hebrews, the doctrine of baptisms. Whether we're talking about being sprinkled, dipped, or fully immersed, the core doctrine of baptism is this exact washing and cleansing for Christ. Hungering and thirsting for righteousness is the intense inward desire to be made clean, while the doctrine of baptisms is the actual outward process of that spiritual cleansing.
Right after being cleansed, Jesus says, "Blessed are the merciful." This is the picture of a person who looks at the people around them and just wants to be a blessing. Even knowing you're still a broken vessel yourself, you have this deep empathetic desire to show mercy. If someone's hurting or going through something tough, you just want things to go well for them. It is a total outward pouring of pure mercy.
The Hebrews translation for this compassionate action is the fourth principle, the laying on of hands. Think about it. There's really nothing more merciful than the laying on of hands to impart a blessing, to bring comfort, or to heal. Being merciful and the laying on of hands are the exact same relational building block. They literally form the structure of how we bless others.
Bringing us to pair 3, eternal realities, the final pair.
Finally, we reach the top of our structure, and this addresses the massive elephant in the room that every philosophy eventually has to deal with. What happens at the very end? Jesus says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." The text essentially tells us that, naturally, we're unspiritual beings. So to actually see God, a profound transformation has to happen. This beatitude is all about that ultimate change, crossing over from our mortal state to being born again into His direct presence.
The fifth principle in Hebrews makes this eternal reality incredibly clear. It is the resurrection of the dead. Becoming pure in heart so you can see God is the exact theological equivalent of experiencing the ultimate resurrection. It's the promise that we'll cross over, hatch like a seed into something entirely new, and stand right there in His presence.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. Blessed are the peacemakers. Now, when we hear peacemakers, sometimes we think of an old Western revolver, right? But truly, a peacemaker in this text is someone who recognizes that peace desperately needs to be made between humanity and God, because there is an ultimate reckoning on the horizon. And if we come to Him, He's going to give us peace before that day arrives.
And this aligns perfectly with the sixth and final principle in Hebrews, eternal judgment. It's a reality that should make absolutely anyone sit up and pay attention. Understanding that eternal judgment is coming is the exact awareness that turns a person into a spiritual peacemaker. You're seeking reconciliation before time runs out.
Choosing your foundation and reviewing the architectural blueprint. So what's the crucial takeaway here? It's that we aren't just looking at some random, disconnected list of poetic thoughts. Look at how this maps out. From admitting we're poor in spirit all the way to becoming peacemakers, the sayings of Jesus seamlessly parallel the doctrine of Christ in perfect pairs. First, they guide our internal relationship with God through repentance and faith. Then, they guide our external relationship with others through cleansing and mercy. And finally, they prepare us for our eternal future through resurrection and judgment. This isn't just poetry. It's a highly structured, intricately designed architectural blueprint for human existence. So now that you have the complete blueprint to understand exactly what the rock is, and you can see how the shifting sands of man's opinions pale in comparison to this kind of structure, we have to end right where we began. I'm going to leave you with the exact same open question Jesus asked His listeners all those years ago. Which one do you want to build your house on?